Hello and welcome back to the Aural Mess podcast. I'm joined tonight by Manny Cruz. Manny, how are you?
Doing good. How are you, Chad?
Good, thanks. I appreciate you coming on the podcast to talk to me. Manny and I met on Instagram on my Steely Dan meme page. So, there's always that connection between Steely Dan nerds like us, I guess. But why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and we'll go from there.
All right. So, as Chad already said, I'm Emmanuel Cruz. I also go by Manny. I am a classically trained musician. I went to school for it. And I'm also a colossal nerd. I don't know if you can see. I have wearing a Dragon Ball shirt, and I got a Ninja Turtle stuff in my bed. But music and my various geek hobbies are my thing. I call myself the Toonie Tenor. If you want to follow me on Instagram and other social media, at the Toonie Tenor, TOONEYTENOR. I love music. Obviously, I went to school for it twice. I have experience as a performer, as in both classical music and sacred music, secular music. I have experience as a music teacher as well, and a lot of what I enjoy, or I shouldn't say enjoy. Well, I mean I enjoy it, but I trace the roots of my love of music to several sources. I mean, there's the encouragement of my first music teacher, Mr. Walker, rest in peace, that he saw me as a child sing and took me under his wing, as well as my grandmother, Aurora Cruz, a Cuban immigrant, came to the States. She loved opera, couldn't do much with it because she was a single mom with two pain in the butts. Sorry, my dad and my uncle. And going back to what I said before with my teacher discovering me, I mean, he told me this often, especially when I was an adult before he passed, but they would always say that you were singing the overture, not the overture, the one of the arias from the Barber of Seville, the famous Figaro, Figaro, Figaro. And he said, you were singing that in kindergarten. I thought you were just being disruptive, but you were being sincere about it. And then it took me a few years ago to realize I learned it by watching a Porky Pig cartoon.
Yes, yes. Didn't we
And
all?
yeah, and I love Warner Brothers cartoons in particular, and there's other things I'm interested in. And I'm just trying to find ways to merge my love of music and my training and all that and my experiences with the various pop culture things I'm into. So, like I said, if you guys decide to do a follow, you'll see maybe 1 minute it's going to be a little musical thing, and then the next it's going to be, I don't know, a clip from The Simpsons or whatever. So
That's the best kind of Instagram. And, speaking of yours, I did check out some of your older posts, just kind of see what you were about before you came on. And beautiful voice, man. Like I watched you sing, I think it was in a church with a piano accompanist, and I was just blown away.
Oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. It's funny you say that because I used to work at AT&T a few years ago, selling phones and whatnot. And I had a new employee come into the store, and she's talking to me, and she's like, I think somebody told her, she's like, Manny, did you go to college for music? I'm like, yeah. She's like, they say like you have like a beautiful voice. I was like, yeah, it's all right, but I appreciate it. She says, I would have never figured it out that you were a classical musician. I was like, why? Is it because you were on the floor talking about professional wrestling for a half hour before? It's just like, I guess it doesn't, maybe you have that idea or that stereotype of like someone who pursues a certain type of music, and it's like, no, it's just, it's one aspect of what I do. And but I always do like the weird looks or the surprises when they find that out. So
That's pretty cool. So you're a man of many interests and kind of like a Renaissance man. And music's universal. I find,
yeah.
and like you said, people have like preconceived notions and things like that. But when it comes down to it, like I connect with people all the time just simply on a love of music because I like every kind of music. I mean, everything from classical, and again, same as you, I sort of discovered classical through Bugs Bunny. So I want to talk about that at some length, but I think I just listen to everything. And I've gotten a lot of attention online. I've gotten a lot of guests on this podcast so far because of the whole Steely Dan connection. But I'm hoping to sort of branch out and talk about more things. So let's talk about the Looney Tunes thing a bit. So you're working on a podcast that y'all are basically going through and sort of analyzing every Looney Tunes cartoon. Is it everyone ever or in a certain era?
Pretty much, yeah. Every one that came out during the classic period.
Right.
I tell a lot of people, they don't remember because, well, not that they don't remember, it's lost to time in some aspects.
Yeah.
That Warner Brothers, they commissioned Looney Tunes, two former Disney animators, Hugh Harman, Rudolph Ising. They split from Disney. They made a pilot in 1929 that was one of the first attempts at synchronizing sound. They sold it to Leon Schlesinger. He had a deal with Warner Brothers, and that's how Looney Tunes started in 1930. And then a year later, the sister series, Merry Melodies, started in 1931. And I like to describe it to people that the original, especially in the 30s, not so much in the 40s and beyond, but the early to mid 30s, especially with the Merry Melodies, they're early music videos. Warner's
Right.
had all this sheet music and the records that they wanted to sell. And if you look up the names of the older cartoons, the name of the cartoons are of song titles. I Only Have Eyes for You, I Love to Sing, Those Beautiful Dames. And I'm actually the collaborator, one of his main collaborators, my buddy from Australia, Anthony Kodarak, that during COVID, I was in grad school at the time. I was studying at the University of Houston, working on that beautiful voices you said. Thank you again. And just sitting in my dorm, going crazy. I went to school to specifically get better at singing, and it's we have to go online, and obviously it's, oh my God, already 4 years since that craziness. And
Yes.
I was like, I need something to do. Let me look up some, because I have YouTube Premium. I'm constantly listening to stuff about music, about fitness, about cartoons. That's my television right there. Or when I drive, I listen to a lot of YouTube. And I was like, let me look up some Looney Tunes stuff. It's, just for the heck of it. And I found his channel when he was still early on in the 30s. I think he started cracking into the 40s. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, I am a huge Looney Tune fan as well. I've been studying the history for the past 20 years, and I'm also a musician. So once you get into the really famous musical cartoons, like, What's Opera Doc and The Rabbit of Seville, I'm your man. I could help you with that, the musical aspect of it. He's like, thanks, I appreciate it, but I already have someone who was at the time collaborating with him, Steph Stilley. Hi, Steph, if you see this. And then I'd say about a few months later, he was like, hey, come on board. Let's do a test run. So we did, you probably remember it, Buckaroo Bugs, the cartoon with the really stupid cowboy and Bugs Bunny. I'm a riding side saddle.
Yes. Yes.
Classic. And I'm like, oh, God, what a perfect one to come on. It's one of my favorite Bugs Bunny shorts. And just the chemistry was there. I mean, Anthony is a little bit older than I am, but obviously I'm from the States. He's from Australia. And of course, talking about you and I connecting over Steely Dan, he and I connected over our love and an encyclopedia knowledge of The Simpsons, and how we can speak in Simpsonese to each other and nobody else knows what we're saying, but we're quoting the show on a daily basis. And it's just it's so awesome. And I've been collaborating with Anthony for the past 4 years, and, jumping on various shorts. He's currently now in the 50s. The cartoons ran from 1930 to 1969, but the really famous ones are I would say the 40s up until the early 60s. That's the meat and potatoes of it. But, I'm doing some cartoons from 1953 now, and he has me working my way back from the early shorts, the Merry Melodies of the 30s and early 40s, and kind of digging into my interest in musicology, because I have a degree, my music degrees are in music education and music performance. But some of my buddies and some of my professors said, you're a musicologist and you don't realize it, because I love history. I'm a huge history buff. And, I'm listening to these, watching the cartoons. I'm trying to watch every single Warner Brothers short in order. I'm behind. It's 1,000 of them in total.
Wow.
But I'm watching them and, obviously picking up some of the cultural references from the 30s and that time period, but just finding the song and looking up the songwriters and, where did these songs come from? Because most of them, like I said, they had sheet music records. They originally came from Warner Brothers films, and I just go crazy over it. And it's fascinating, and people I call it Manny's music time whenever I pop up on his thing. And so far I've gotten a lot of good feedback, and eventually I'd like to do that for other things, both musical and non-musical.
That's really cool. And I listened to an episode just to kind of get a feel, and I'm definitely going to subscribe and work my way back to some of the other episodes because, again, I have older siblings, right? So I'm 52. My sister's 13 years older than I am. My brother's a little bit older. He's 11 years older. And they were both really into Bugs Bunny cartoons. So therefore, I got my love of Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Porky Pig and the whole gang from them. But like you said, you guys have this sort of secret shared language with the Simpsons. The same with my siblings. Like we still to this day will talk in Bugs Bunny quotes to each other, like at holidays and on the phone, and like we'll text each other things. And my sister calls me and I'll answer the phone and go, "That you, Mert?"
Is that you, Mert? How's every little thing? And
Yeah.
funny that you say that. Like a lot of the jokes in those older shorts, those are radio catchphrases.
Right. Right.
That like, is that you, Mert? Ain't I a stinker? Or he broke my widow head. He broke my widow arms. That's all vaudeville and radio references from the 30s and 40s that we think, oh, that's a Bugs Bunny phrase or that's a Porky
Right.
Pig phrase, but and again, that's just like me getting into the whole history aspect of it, and like I mean, when I first started getting into the history of Looney Tunes when I was a middle schooler, I mean, I didn't know how old you are, and you shocked me because I'm like, I look older than you. I'm 35 myself. I'll be 36 next month, and it's funny that you were saying like you watch the cartoons on television and your siblings like they started showing these cartoons on TV in the 50s. My
Right.
father was the first generation of kids to watch them. My dad's 71, and I was the last. I was what? They started pulling these cartoons off of television, like all channels, because they started being shown only on Cartoon Network in the early 2000s. But from the end of the 90s to the 50s to the end of the 90s, they were everywhere. Local television, cable, whatever. And great. I just forgot what I was going to go with this. Probably wasn't that important, but sorry. So I got into the history of them in middle school. One day I was like, the name Bosco popped in my head, and I was like thinking Bosco is chocolate syrup,
Yep.
but it's also this cartoon character that I vaguely remembered seeing as a little kid in the early 90s, like a black and white character. And I went on the computer, went on Yahoo, remember those days? And it brought me to this website, Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, the early years. And I was like, wait, Looney Tunes are from the 30s? They're from... Bosco was a Looney Tune character? I was like, but Porky Pig is, and Tweety, and, the Tasmanian Devil. And that's where it went from there. And then, like I said, there was other things that I'm passionate about, like, oh, I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I grew up watching the cartoon, the movies, the toys. Oh, the first comic book was from 1984. It was in black and white. It was violent. Like, it just starts spreading from there. It's just everything that I'm into. It's like even if I see like a movie or a TV show once, I have to go on the Wikipedia page. I have to dig into the details. I got to do the production credits, and
Yeah.
obviously for music too. It's fascinating. Obviously to look at like, oh, what musicians were shared and with this band or this band. And yesterday on my Instagram, I posted about Michael McDonald. His birthday was yesterday. I was like, man, he was great by himself. And then he was with the Doobie Brothers. And of course, I'm thinking of the vocals that he did for Steely Dan and all that other stuff. And it's just like, and everybody else is just like, why do you just get so intrigued about it? I'm like, it's what I enjoy. Some people love like math. They think in mathematical terms. They think in expression or what. I don't know. I had a point somewhere. If you find it, let me know.
Oh, you made the point, and I think you made it well. And yeah, it's the same thing with me. Like, I've listened to Steely Dan for quite a long time. I've talked about this a lot in previous episodes and stuff. And my thing is, I just started to get to the point with them 4 or 5 years ago where I got like obsessed, right? Where, like you said, I had to go look at the production credits, and then you started to see the common threads of, Gary Katz produced everything and Roger Nichols was the engineer. And well, why did they have him on all their albums? Was he that good? And then you go read about Roger Nichols and you find out that he's like this engineering genius, and same with me. Like when I get into something, I tend to want to know everything about it, right? So I go to the Wikipedia page, I go and see if there's a subreddit about it. I find like a Twitter community around it, and I kind of immerse myself. And that's what happened with Steely Dan. And, here I am how many years later, and I'm still down that rabbit hole, rabbit hole. Haha. Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny.
Pretty good, Doc.
Thanks. And apparently, by the way, Becker and Fagan were both big Looney Tunes fans. Like they were like, giant Bugs Bunny watchers, apparently. So
see that I didn't
there's
know.
a connection.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, what was it? Fagan was 50 and no, Fagan was 48 and Becker was 1950. So yeah, they're literally a few years older than my dad, so it completely makes sense. And Donald Fagen's my fellow Jersey boy. He's from South Brunswick. I'm from Elizabeth, New Jersey,
Oh wow, okay.
and Becker from New York. My father was born in New York City, so and I even think about that too. Sometimes I'm like, did Dad ever cross paths with him at one point before they made the move out to California?
You never
This is
know.
the stuff that keeps me up at night. So,
Right. Fellow North Jersey guy here, by the way.
oh, nice, man.
Yeah,
We're the best.
absolutely. I mean, I was born and raised in South Jersey, but I've been in North Jersey for a little over 20 years now, so I consider myself, an unofficial North Jerseyan by association.
So I have to ask this question, and hopefully you get the right answer. That delicious pork product, or that's like it's like Canadian bacon, as I say to people who are not from this area. Goes great with eggs and cheese. I don't eat cheese, but what do you call that thing?
It is pork roll, my
Oh,
friend.
all right.
Unfortunately.
I'm leaving. Bye. I can't send you my North Jersey card. I can't submit you for membership. Yeah, you still got to work your way up.
That's the one thing I hold on to. It's funny, and New Jersey's official Twitter page just posted a bunch of fun stuff like yesterday and today about like Valentine's Day, and they had like the little candy hearts with like North Jersey, South Jersey, and then they skipped Central Jersey, so everybody was freaking out about that. And I'm a big Central Jersey exists believer, so I had to jump into that conversation. But they did a Taylor ham and pork roll thing, and I was just trolling everybody that was saying Taylor ham, and I was like, you spelled pork roll wrong, guys. Sorry. It's great. My wife and I get into it because she'll once in a while we'll get some Taylor ham. I'll say it. She gets some Taylor ham at the store, and I'll be like, "Oh, thanks for the pork roll, honey," and she's like, "Shut up."
I've
Yeah.
done that too, or like I've been in South Jersey. I was like, yeah, let me have a Tail ham and egg. They're like looking at the menu, say, you know what to call it. I was like, yeah, I just did. It's Taylor ham. And I'm fine. Give me some pork roll. Or when you go to was it a Quick Check? Because I have a Quick Check now several in the area, not far from where I work. And it's just I go in there and I'm like, ugh, like I cringe, like I don't want to call it. It's like thank God they have the little computer screen you could order it. I'll just it's like my secret shame. It's bad enough I accept Wawa. I'm not going to do that either.
Hey, Wawa is the way. I grew up on Wawa. So, you mentioned teaching music, by the way. So is that your day gig?
Yeah, I've done it for a few years now. I teach elementary music for the time being, but I have experiences doing middle school. Done a little bit of like literally I taught two classes at the college level because I was a graduate assistant, and yeah, just trying to educate the youth on just music and just more so much I would say just an appreciation for it because I trying to think what would be the best way of saying it. It's hard to get younger people's attention, especially nowadays because there's so many different choices of things you can do, and I don't expect every kid to love music or be interested in it or just like play an instrument or sing in a choir. But my biggest goal is to just have a lifelong openness and appreciation of music in general. I mean, I always make the argument to younger people that it's like you don't know how fortunate you are when it comes to music accessibility. And I mean, yeah, we
Yes.
can get into the argument of how things are with streaming because I love streaming and I also hate streaming for a bunch of different reasons. When it comes to the ethical issues of musicians and payments and royalties and all that, but it's like you pretty much have an entire buffet at your disposal whenever you want. Try, just try. I remember hearing that rule where it's like if you hear a song, give it 3 times. By the third time, you'll love it, or you don't like it. And I said the beautiful thing is if you don't want to hear it, you don't have to listen to it ever again. You don't have
Right.
to worry about oh you hear your favorite song and you hope and pray that there's a cassette inside your your tape player. And hopefully the DJ is kind enough to say, all right, that was, I don't know, This Is It by Kenny Loggins. Or,
Right.
but that's just something that just that ease of accessibility. It's like, take advantage of it. Take advantage of the knowledge and the resources that you have available to, enjoy music. Because I also say to my students, all the students I've had, my oldest students now are adults, in their mid to late 20s now when I first started teaching. But, I said, you know what? At the end of the day, you're going to see music as a source of, as a positive thing, not just for enjoyment, but you want to go to concerts. You want to maybe sing in a community choir or a church choir. You want to pick up your instrument, play again. If you have children and if your kid says, hey, Mom, Dad, I want to go sing in a choir, you're not going to say, oh, well, Mr. Cruz was a real jerk to me 20, 30 years ago, whatever. It's like, no, I want you to sign up for it and I want you to have a positive experience from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, are they still? I know for a while that they weren't really, a lot of schools just didn't have funding for music programs and they weren't doing like instrumental music. Like when I grew up and I went to public school in Atlantic City, they even had instrumental music programs where like, the school had a just closet full of instruments and you got assigned, a trumpet, a saxophone, a violin, whatever your interest was, and you kept that instrument for the whole year to take home. And you got lessons every week, and then, in junior high and high school, you could be in the band and, the orchestra and whatever else. But it seems like that's not so much of a common thing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on obviously the district you're in, the school. I mean, in my teaching career, I've been fortunate that because I don't do instrumental, I do vocal
Hmm.
music. But it's fortunate that yeah, you want to play the saxophone, you have to hit fourth, fifth grade or trumpet or violin. You could sign up for it, and obviously get your pull-out lessons, but it's just you have to deal with just the schedule, and then you obviously have to deal with the emphasis on just standardized testing. I think that's one of the biggest issues I have
Yeah.
with being a teacher in general because it just eats away so much at the time of not just music teachers and and gym teachers and art teachers, but just the classroom teachers themselves. Because I have been very fortunate to have in my teaching career worked with so many amazing teachers. I mean, I hate all the negative talk that teachers get, just from people who think they know and they don't. And so many teachers they pour out their hearts, their souls, just to make sure that these kids have a bright future. A lot of them have their own children and it's like they want their kids to succeed. They want these other kids to succeed as well. I don't have children at the moment. I have a dog, as you probably could see behind me. But, at the end of the day, it's like I'm going to be gone one day, and I want to set up a positive future for not only myself, but for them if I ever have children and whatnot. And it's just that's something that I feel gets lost in all the shuffle of, you know, people trying to tell you how to do your job when it's like, no, this is not how it's done, trust the people who know it. Or even like with just, like sometimes it's similar to my experiences as being a musician. It's like, I'm the kind of person, I'm not going to give you my opinion unless you ask for it. And then if you say, or your expertise, and if I give it to you, if you don't like it, it's like, well, you asked me and I know what I'm talking about, so maybe you should do it. It's like, oh, wow, I feel like crap right now. Let me go to a doctor. And you go to the doctor and he tells you something. It's like, okay, you have this problem. You need to do this. Oh, I'm not too happy about that. Well, then why did you bother asking the expert in the first place?
Right. Yeah. I used to play in bands and I still play guitar just for pleasure. My daughter, who's 17, is very musically inclined. She has great taste in music. I don't even want to pretend to take credit for more than half of it because she's discovered so much on her own, between like just friends and social media, I mean, and at some point I'm going to have her on here if she wants to do an episode with me to talk about, how she's discovered all this music because she'll just come downstairs like singing like Duran Duran. And my wife and I look at each other like, where the hell did you hear that? you know? And she's like, TikTok, duh, So, I mean, it's just amazing how these kids, like you said, they have like this unlimited world of media accessible to them at all times. And just to build an appreciation for it, I think, and to sort of get your head around the fact that music is not just a hobby. It's not just something that you do when you're not doing other things. It's for a lot of people, it's life saving, it's life changing. And they've done studies. They prove that it helps with math comprehension and reading and everything else. So I just feel like, yeah, like you said, like having teachers and trying to tell them what to do and just not teaching to a curriculum and teaching to a standardized test. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I could spend another 2 hours talking about, and it's not just like, oh, I want they're pulling away from the music part. It's not just that. It's like, just having a well-rounded individual, and you were saying about music saves lives. Where I went to Montclair State from undergrad, and they have an awesome music therapy program. I remember in high school, my band teacher was like, the music therapists, they're there. Just leave them be. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, they actually do like a lot of cool stuff, just, using music for therapeutical purposes, for children with special needs, for the elderly, for people who are recovering from, injury or whatever. And there was a video that I saw. I don't know if you ever saw it. I think it was like a trailer for a documentary. And it was this lady, and her father was probably in his 80s or 90s at this point, could barely speak. Excuse me, elderly guy, and you talk to him, he's mumbling all his things. And this is when I would say like the mid 2000s, late 2000s, when the iPod was still kind of brand new. I think it was the iPod Mini, and I forgot the name of the music expert. He was a doctor or something. A doctorate in music. And they said, why don't we put the music that he loves and enjoys inside this device? And it was gospel music, it was spirituals, and a lot of stuff from like Cab Calloway, and a lot of amazing black music from the 30s and 40s. And his daughter puts on the headphones, and like literally it's like a light switch turning on.
Wow.
And it's just like he comes back to life. He starts singing along. He sings, like the melodies just come back to him, the words. And then the doctor said something. He's like, music's the quickening art. And they take off the headphones and they start talking to him. His name was Henry. And he's like, Henry, yeah? Did you like the music? Yeah, I loved it. Like, you were able to understand him. And he's like, yeah, I love listening to Cab Calloway and this and that. And then he starts singing and he starts scatting like Cab Calloway. And it's just like literally a light switch turned on. You see his daughter like in tears, just like, I can't believe just by him listening to his favorite music, he came back. It's like my father has returned. And like, I can't help but like tearing up a little bit whenever I see that part. But it's crazy. And we have the means, the technology to do that kind of stuff now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'll have to go check that out. So, and it's funny you say like, people, I can't remember sometimes what I had for breakfast 2 days ago, but I can play every drum fill, air drumming in the car of, 15 different Steely Dan songs, right? Or so like, any other music that I'm into. But I mean, like, it's just funny. It's like music is so ingrained in me and it's just in my brain. You know what I mean? So I can see how that could be a thing where that would turn on a light switch.
So one day you're driving. I was gonna say like one day you're in a hotter mood, and then you're in a purdy mood, and then Marota. Yeah,
hotter. I think hotter doesn't get enough love. But let's talk about Steely Dan because again, like I think that's how we sort of initially, kind of stumbled across each other on Instagram. But when did you get into the band? I hate ranking and I hate saying your favorite thing because for me it changes every 5 minutes. My favorite album, my favorite drummer, my favorite this, my favorite that, but. Give me some highlights, give me some things that you like in their catalog, and let's dig into some of that.
All right. So how did I get into them? And I hope you don't mind me shoving this is my delicious dinner, my smoothie as I'm trying to cut some weight. So, I mean, I got into them just late in general because, I mean, was it Gaucho released 8 years before I was born? So yeah, there's that. Okay, now I know the exact time period. So when I started downloading music in less than legal means, back in the day, in middle school and high school. So I remember, using Napster and LimeWire and screwing up my family computer without realizing it. And I grew up like, well, I don't belong in this time period in terms of my musical tastes. I mean, like I said, I'm 35. I was born in the late 80s, whatever. So what is the music of my time period? Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera. I mean, at the Super Bowl a few days ago, everybody my age was going crazy over Usher and Alicia Keys and all that. And obviously I know that because I remember hearing it in school. I remember hearing it in, my friends talking about it. But me as a kid, I listened to 106.7 Light FM in New York City, and I was hearing, Billy Joel. I was hearing James Taylor and Elton John and all that, soft rock, whatever, the 60s or the 80s. My dad, that I credit, both my parents are not musicians. They don't know squat about music. I got the musical connection from my grandma because she sang and knew a little bit about it. But I always credit both my parents for some of my musical tastes. I mean, my mother is Puerto Rican, and she came here when she was about 17, 18. And a lot of music she played back then I hated. Now I enjoy like a lot of salsa music, boleros, Mexican music from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Just very beautifully sung. Guys like Jose Jose and, salsa music like Hector Lavoe and whatever that I eventually wound up singing, and I love singing salsa music. But for my old man, like I said, he was born in New York and he grew up in northern Jersey. He was always putting on 101.1 CBS FM, the greatest hits of all time. And from him, I got doo-wop, I got Motown, I got stuff from the 70s. And my dad loves Philly soul. I got that from him too. I mean, I love the Stylistics and Harold Melvin, the Blue Notes, and also some classic rock. I mean, my favorite. Oh, I don't want to say. I'm a little nervous now because again, it might change. But for years, I've always said my favorite band is The Doors. But Steely Dan might take over that title sooner or later. But So anyway, I would be making compilations of my music because again, my classmates were listening to Ludacris and Lil Jon, and I was like, I want to listen to Peabo Bryson singing "If Ever in Your My like I oh my god, I wish I still had the CDs of. I wrote like Emmanuel's Music Volume 1, and it's like I remember I would go from like Laughter in the Rain by Neil Sedaka to If You're Ever in My Arms Again by Peabo Bryson to In the Club by 50 Cent. That was one of the few hip hop songs I heard back then. I mean, I was in high school when it dropped. I had to put it, and I did like it. And one of those songs in that compilation was Do It Again.
Oh, wow.
It was the only Steely Dan song I knew. I thought that Steely Dan was a one-hit wonder, and that's it. And I liked to Do It Again because I probably heard it on 101.1, and whatever, life goes on. So then, I'd say around 2013, it's just like the universe or whatever was conspiring for me to become a fan of the Dan. And I remember a teacher I worked with, a band teacher, John Riley, awesome guy, drummer. He had the cover of, and this is what I said back then. I was like, what's this Aja thing that you have on in there? He's like, yeah, it's Steely Dan. I was like, oh, I've heard of them, but what's the Aja? He's like, oh, it's like their best album, whatever. And then I go on Facebook, and one of my fraternity brothers was talking about Steely Dan as well. I was like, all right, more clues are coming in. And I have a buddy of mine, a professional opera singer, Keith Fares, awesome guy. He loves yacht rock. He loves a lot of like Philly soul, Motown, similar musical tastes. And every day, like he puts up clips of, like today's so-and-so's birthday, so he'll put their music on YouTube. And I heard him talking about Steely Dan as well on Facebook. So now I was like, you know what? Let me check these guys out. And I think it was my fraternity brother that mentioned either the Royal Scam, the album, or maybe one song in particular. And that I guess my gateway was The Caves of Altamira.
Oh, yeah.
And I heard it. I was like, man, the horn section is just rock solid on this thing. And I just kept listening to it more and more. And around that time, I bought a CD copy of Aja. And I just let it sit there for a few months. And then I went to California to do an opera program. And then when I came back, I was like, let me finally put this thing in my computer. And I ripped the CD. I put it onto iTunes. And then I obviously started with Black Cow and worked my way down. I was like, all right, some cool things, whatever. And I think by the second time, it's just like, that's when the change happened. And I'm like, holy cow, I got to do more. So then I think I got the rest of the Royal Scam. And then I was like, I have to listen to more. I mean, it happened with Billy Joel. It happened with The Doors, other things. I just have to listen to the entire discography. And that's just when the floodgates open, just constantly listening to, all the albums. And then I think in the same year, I saw that they were performing in Red Bank So I saw them at Red Bank. I got to see at the Count Basie Theater, and it's just like, and then at the that show at the souvenir booth or the merchandise booth, they had a hoodie of, and now I could finally say it right, of Asia. And I was like, "Oh, I got to wear this hoodie. I have to." And it wasn't cheap, but I still have it to this day. And I've had some people just like, "Dude, like, awesome hoodie, like, phenomenal album, blah 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 blah." And it goes in. You know how it is. It's like it goes in waves. So you listen to them, and then you peter off, and then it happens again. And I've made a joke about it. It's like, "Oh, I'm on my yearly Steely Dan kick." And it happened a few months ago, and right around the time too that I found out about the new pressings, the ultra high quality pressings that Analog Productions did, and listening to the guys like talking about like finding the master tapes and like really, and I mean especially Asia and Gaucho are just so well produced.
Yeah.
But like I'm like, it's $150, but I really want to get it. My birthday's next month, and if somebody wants to get it, please do so. But it's yeah, it. I would say since then they've definitely been my second favorite band. I said might creep over to number one. I think because of the longevity. Like I've been listening again to the Doors. It's been a while, but and just like the stories themselves about like the Fagan and Becker's stories, and just like the rotating cast of musicians, and then like I look at just the murderer's row of people that they had on their records. I mean, like McDonald and Purdy and Larry Carlton and all these other guys, and then I see like, holy cow, like they also worked with the Doobie Brothers and Stevie Wonder and all these other phenomenal musicians. And now I'm thinking Billy Joel, Phil Woods, who did the sax solo on Doctor
Yeah.
Wu, and it's just like, and I don't know, it's because I've heard some people say like with Dan, it's like you either love him or hate him,
Yeah.
and I haven't found too many people that hate him, but like yeah, like you and me and some other people, like I said, my buddy Keith and a few other people, friends of mine, that once they found out I was a Dan fan, they were just like, "Oh my God, like Manny, we gotta hang out." And I know there's another friend of mine, Zoe, that when she found I just like converted to the Church of Dan, that she was like, "You gotta listen to Fagan's solo album." So she sent me, the Nightfly trilogy, and I mean, I actually never fully listened to Morph the Cat and Kamakiriad until years later,
Hmm.
and they're both great. But
Yeah.
I mean, the Nightfly is just such a great album, such good stuff.
Oh yeah, great stuff. And you totally nailed it. I think the Dan is very polarizing. You don't find people who are just casual listeners, and if they are, they're just into so many other things. And Steely Dan's just sort of there in the rotation. But you've either got like the hardcore fanatics, or you've got the people that just can't stand them or don't get them. And those are not mutually exclusive. So yeah, and the solo stuff. How about Walter Becker's solo albums? Have you dug into those at all?
I've listened to them a few times, but not as much as Fagan stuff. I mean, I've listened to it was 12 tracks of Whack and Circus Money, and I've enjoyed them. But I guess when it comes to just how he constructs things musically, I guess my tastes lean more towards what Fagan did,
Yeah,
because
same.
lyrically, like all that. I mean, they were both just two sarcastic cranks from Northeast, but I think like especially with the stuff I've seen, listened to and read from Becker, it's like he leans more into that cynicism and that sarcasm and wit. I mean, the guy was absolutely witty, and I was fortunate to have seen Becker I think 3 times before he passed. And whenever he does his whole spiel, just before he does the ending of Hey 19,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, yeah, that's his stuff. And then you look at like some of the tracks on the Nightfly or Kamakiriad in particular, just the more the I guess sentimental stuff. I mean, I I mean, like I said, Nightfly, album from top to bottom, but I really love Maxine.
Yes.
It's a gorgeous, gorgeous. I'm a sucker for ballads in general, and
Yeah.
a part of me is like, I would have liked to have seen more of that stuff from them, but at the same time, that's not who they are.
Right.
But it was nice to see, like, kind of, just how it is, falling in love and just thinking, this is going to be it. And then obviously going into New Frontier and just thinking of the optimism of when we were younger. And some of the stuff too on Sunken Condos, like the first few songs in that album, I just absolutely love. I mean, Slinky Thing in particular,
Yes.
and yeah, like I remember it was about 2 3 years ago that I finally, like I said, got into Comic Period, and I was listening to On the Dunes, and that song does not feel like 8 minutes long,
It doesn't.
and it's like the perfect song. I would tell people it's like you're driving down either Route 9 or you're going down, yeah, I would say Route 9, like you're going towards the shore,
Yep.
and put on the Dunes. It's like, mwah, as I do
It's
on my
perfect.
Looney Tune channel, Chef's Kiss. Mwah, perfect. It's like the perfect driving song for that.
It is, totally is. And Maxine, yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the first part of Nightfly. You've got that sort of optimism and you've got that young person's verve, but then Maxine's like that he grows up and moves to the city, right? That song to me
Yeah.
always just felt like New York.
Hmm.
And Comic Myriad took me a while to get into Comic Myriad. I was around when it came out, and I remember, I was a big MTV head back in the day, and I just remember seeing the video for Tomorrow's Girls, right? And thinking, just loving Steely Dan at that point already, and thinking, oh wow, Fagen's pretty cool. He's got this song on MTV, and whatever. But besides the novelty of that coming out and it being like new, Donald Fagen stuff, which didn't really have an impact on me at the time. And I had the CD and I just couldn't really get into it for whatever reason. It just didn't feel right. But then later on, I think every album in its own way has just hit me at a certain point in time, whether it's where I am in my life or where I am in my musical education, because that never stops, right? And they just sort of grab me in different ways. And Morph the Cat, if you haven't sort of, delved into that whole thing, I was really into that album for a long time. The Night Belongs to Mona. It's one of my favorite Fagin songs ever. It's just beautiful. It's like haunting, but in a good way.
Yeah. Speaking of haunting, I think, I mean, Morph the Cat itself, I really like. That's probably of the four Fagin albums that, I mean, I've listened to it a decent amount of times, but it's just like that's not the one that really jumps at me as much. Not saying it's bad at all, but now you say like haunting. I love Bright Nightgown.
Yes.
And also like lyrically when I realized what it was about. And that's the other thing too, like I'll explain it to, like non-Dan fans. It's like, oh, this song is about blah, blah, blah. And they're like, what? I'm like, I always tell people, pay attention to the words. Like I was, not that long ago, telling my mom about the Royal Scam, and then when I realized what the songs talk, well, I know their lyrics are always up to interpretation, but it's like the city of St. John, that's San Juan, talking
Yep.
about the Puerto Ricans that came to this part of the country, like my family and my other relatives, and just yeah, we got the short end of the stick in
Yeah.
in many different ways. And like I'm explaining that to her. I was like, Mom, like this would resonate with you because this is your family. This is your experience to an extent. And I'm always the kind of guy, like when I listen to music, I care about the music first. I want to listen to the melody. I want to listen to the what's going on with the arrangement, the instrumentals, whatever. It's never like, oh my God, like, I got to focus on the lyrics. That's more secondary for me. But I remember when I was started to listen to Everyone's Gone to the Movies. And that was one of the songs that I'm just driving, like, hey, everyone's gone. And then, like my face just gets
It hit you.
horrified in the middle of driving. I was like, oh, my God, it's I hope it's not what I think it's about. I mean, I love
That
that
one.
song, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh, my God, it's terrible.
Yeah, that one and Cousin Dupree, it's just like, what the hell?
You just tell someone, it's like, it's a great song. Don't look up the lyrics, please, for the love of God, don't.
Yeah, don't read too much into it. That's
Yeah.
funny. So you mentioned that your favorite band at the moment is The Doors, and I'm not really a big Doors fan. I have to say, I like them. I like some of the hits, the songs that everybody knows. But what sort of drew you to The Doors, and what's special about them for you?
Well, like I said before, my dad, I got my classic rock taste from him and classic Motown R&B. So when I was really little, my dad had their first album, which a lot of people say is their best one. You got, Break On Through, The End, Light My Fire, other songs like that. A Crystal Ship, love the piano solo on that one. But he had that album and he would play it a lot. I remember I'm like, what, 6, 7 years old, and my dad's listening to the end. Father, yes, son, I want to kill you. And I'm just looking at him. I'm like, you all right, dude? I mean, he drives me nuts, but and also I went to Puerto Rico once. It was actually 30 years ago, and visit my mom's family and whatnot. And we brought the Doors' first CD with us because my brother and I, my older brother, we just loved listening to Break On Through. We just kept repeating it over and over again on the CD, and my brother, he and I don't always see eye to eye on things, but our musical tastes are very different. He sometimes gets a little frustrated because of how like passionate I am about music. But that was something like we kind of like enjoyed, and he likes some of the Doors stuff as well. And actually crediting him to an extent. So yeah, in middle school once again, we were on a computer, and my brother downloaded Peace Frog from their fifth album, Morrison Hotel, and I just started listening to it again with the guitar in the beginning with Robbie Krieger, and that was like my gateway into the Doors. Like I already knew I knew their first album from top to bottom, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it. But then I heard Peace Frog, and I was like, my God, and and I hear that song, and I get transported back to seventh grade. And then I was like, from there, I started asking my dad, like, Dad, can I get the other Doors albums? And he was like, yeah, I love listening to them back in the day. And, I'd be with my dad in the car and playing L.A. Woman and Morrison Hotel and the Soft Parade. And he's telling me, like, yeah, I used to listen to this one back in, 71 and blah, 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 blah. And like kind of a cool way of bonding with my dad. And then, of
Yeah.
course, he likes, we have similar musical tastes. And I used to have, the little package with all your CDs in your car.
Right.
And he comes up to me one day. He's like, I got some bad news. I'm like, what's up, Dad? Your CDs are broken. I was like, how did that happen? Yeah, I took your CD thing and I put it on top of the car for a minute and then I forgot and I drove away. And I'm like, man, if I did that, you would have screamed at me until the cows come home. So, I mean, now obviously everything's digital, but I think and I know I could see some of the criticisms that people have of the Doors. I had a high school band instructor that was like, I bleeping hate the Doors, and like I guess it was because of the lyrics, and yeah, some of the lyrics they're not that great. I'll admit it, and kind of like the pretentiousness of Morrison. Or I shouldn't say, yeah, kind of that, but just also like how he's become like such a huge figure.
Yeah.
But it's like for me, it's like you can't discount the work that the other guys did, Ray Manzarek and who I got to see, and John Densmore. I met him in Bergen County a few years ago, and Robbie Krieger, who I also got to see. And like musically, they were just doing such cool things at the time and really pushing psychedelic rock. And yeah, again, yesterday on my Instagram, I posted about Ray Manzarek. He was his birthday yesterday as well. And just some of the stuff he did on the organ and playing the bass part as well when they were playing live, like just musically, it always appeals to me. And I guess they still remain my favorite one because they were like the first band that I really got hardcore into. And I still love their music, but I can see some of their what people criticize. And same thing, like I'm a huge Billy Joel fan. I got obsessed with him in high school. He's my favorite musician. But, some of the criticisms, especially some of his lyrical choices, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see your point, but the guy was a master at melody.
Yeah,
You
for
can't,
sure.
it's like, he idolizes, Lennon and McCartney. It's like, well, clearly you have the gift of melody that they got, so you learn from the best. And then Beethoven as well, so he did something right.
He did a lot right. I'm a big Billy Joel fan, even to this day. I was really excited with the new song that came out, although honestly, it wasn't crazy about it. It's pretty good. But
I'm the same way with it.
yeah, I just felt like because it was such a build up and it was so long. You know what I mean? It's a great song, but I think it was just not. It didn't live up to the hype that I built in my own head for it, right? But my brother, again, he wore out Billy Joel albums when I was a kid, and I used to hang out in his bedroom, and he had the stereo system with the big speakers, and he would play 52nd Street and The Stranger, and then Glass Houses came out when I was 8 years old, and that was one of the first records. I think it was like one of the first three or four records that I bought with my own allowance money. Right. So I just played that thing to death, and I still to this day I think it's my favorite album. I mean, I just know every single piece of every single instrument and vocal on that whole album. Um, and I stuck with him through the '80s into the '90s. Wasn't really a huge fan of the last couple albums. A couple good songs on there, but I felt like I respect the fact that he went out on top, right? Like, and was it '93? I think he just said, you know
Yeah.
what? I don't have anything else to say. I've said what I want to say. I'm done. I want to focus on playing piano and arranging and composing, more classical stuff. And I just don't have another pop record in me. And, I'm not going to do it just for the money, right? So you got to give props to the guy for knowing when to get out of the game. But that catalog, I mean, Turnstiles, another one of my favorites. Just, I know those albums backwards and forwards in no small part because of my brother. But even, as I got into adulthood, I just kept listening to them because they're that good.
That's something that's always bummed me out about like my taste in music because I am removed from the like from the just like the impact that it has on pop culture because we were talking about Comic and River of Dreams, the last album he did. I mean, I remember hearing the song "The River of Dream," which I love that song constantly. But yeah, those albums, Comic and River of Dreams came out in '93. I was
Right.
only 5 years old at the time, so I don't remember any, and obviously all the great albums from the '70s and '80s, I wasn't around. I mean, for Joel, I was only alive for Stormfront from '89 and River of Dreams. And yeah, I agree, from the bridge on, kind of more hit and miss. I mean, there's, some standout tracks in all of them. And River of Dreams, like I said, the title track I love a lot. Lullaby, All About Soul, The Great Wall of China. But it's you hit the point that I was really thinking about. It's just like one of the reasons why I just also respect him so much is that he has that integrity. It's like, look, I'm kind of running on fumes at this point, and literally his last song on River of Dreams is the famous last words. And it's just like, look, I could just keep churning out stuff, and it's just, the law of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And again, he built such goodwill throughout the '70s and '80s. I mean, it's funny when you started mentioning his albums. I was like, yes, he nailed my top two because I know everybody goes with The Stranger as number one. I mean, that was I'll get to that in a second. But The Stranger, but my personal favorite is 52nd Street.
Huh, okay.
Love the album from top to bottom. Until the Night is my favorite Billy Joel
Yeah.
song. I've never heard him play it live. If he ever does, I mean, I'm going to try to see him one more time at the Garden. Excuse me, I've seen him 4 times, and I'll cry like a baby if he does it. But like I said, the Caves of Altamira was my Steely Dan gateway. Peace Frog was my Doors gateway. The title track of The Stranger was my gateway because I knew his stuff. I mean, again, listening to Light FM, I heard Just the Way You Are. I heard Only the Good Die Young. I heard River of Dreams. I heard New York State of Mind. All like I was familiar with them, and I liked those songs. They were part of my Manny's mix back in middle school and high school.
That
But
CD. Yep.
I had a good friend of mine. His name is Tommy Stathis. He's connected to my cartoon side. He's a year younger than me. He's from Queens, but he's another old soul when it comes to our musical taste. We're similar things that we enjoy, and he's an expert on silent animation. Like he literally has thousands of film reels, and he teaches about anim. He's a well respected silent animation historian. And we were on a message board for cartoons for older cartoons, and we were messaging each other one day on AIM. Remember those days?
Yes, I do.
And he was like, "Do you like Billy Joel?" I was like, "Yeah, I like some of his stuff. The popular ones." He's like, "You ever heard this song?" So he messaged me a file of The Stranger, and I heard it. I'm like, "Oh, this whistling, this piano, it's so good." And then it gets to the rock part. And then it's like, oh my God, I need more. I need more. And then when I looked at the track list of The Stranger, I was like, oh, I know most of these songs. And just, it goes from there. And I said, all these years later, just still into the stuff. It's just that music still has a charm to it, and I'm glad that he, finally released that new song. Not 30 years, because some people are like, he hasn't done a new song. I was like, no, he did. All my life that he wrote for his ex-wife. It was all right. So another sappy ballad, and he did Christmas in Fallujah that someone else
All right.
recorded. But I mean, some people are saying, maybe he has another album in him. And I was reading about the co-writer of the new song, "Turn the Lights Back On," Freddie Wexler. He's
Yeah.
what, 2 years older than I am,
Yeah, I saw that whole thing.
and
That's
he's like,
crazy.
he was able to pull, like get the guy who retired. It's like, come on, champ, you got one more fight in you, and it's like, it's crazy how, you know a young person who we were removed in time from the impact of Joel was able to convince him to do it. And it's like, I have those days where it's like, I'll tell my dad or I'll tell other people that, we're alive for these acts. Like, I wish I was there to experience it in person. But then another side of me is like, I'm kind of glad to see it from a historical perspective because,
Mm.
it removes the baggage or maybe, the critical response or just, the perception of it. I mean, like, another person I absolutely adore is Stevie Wonder. And, I listen to this stuff from the 70s from, like, Music of My Mind and Inner Visions and Songs in the Key of Life. And it's just like, just the accolades he was getting back then. I'm like, man, I wish I was there to just see, like, Stevie in his prime, or all these other guys that I'm into. But, great music transcends time. It's like,
It really
another
does.
catchphrase of mine. It's like, great music doesn't have an expiration date. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
That is correct. Well, that's a great place to end because we're getting just close to a little bit under an hour here, and I like to keep these right around that time frame. But anything else you want to cover before we go?
I think I covered a lot. In my head, I was like, dude, shut up, let Chad
No,
talk.
no,
But
not at all. No, you've been great, Manny. This has been fantastic.
well, something I will say is that Miles Davis behind you?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, I guess a nice way to wrap this up. But the song "Birdland" Weather Report. I love the song. I first played it in middle school jazz band, and it wasn't until recent that I found the vocal version of it. I found lyrics to it, and I'm like singing along to it, whatever. And I did it at work for the concert, and like teaching about Art Blakey and Miles Davis and whatever. It's like perfect. And then I didn't realize that the lyrics were from the Manhattan Transfer version of it from 1979.
Right.
And I feel like an idiot. I was like, oh my God, I should have found this months ago. And I'm like, you should have gone on Spotify and YouTube. You have no excuse. And I also collect, I don't have one in front of me, but I used to have 300 of them with the little Funko Pops with the
Oh
big
yeah.
heads and the big
Uh-huh.
black eyes. Like, I have ones of, especially for Black History Month, I have one of Lionel Richie and Aretha Franklin. I ordered Michael Jackson from him wearing the Beat It outfit. And I'm like, I got to get that Miles Davis one too.
Yes.
Just him holding the trumpet and now I got to go listen to Kind of Blue as well. Now that I mention it.
Miles was my gateway to jazz and specifically that era of jazz. And the poster has kind of a funny story too. So I used to work at a school district. I work in IT, so I've been doing technology for years, but I worked at a school district in the late 90s. And this is when Apple had their Think Different ad campaign where they had like all different, uh, pioneers and visionaries and things in their ad campaign. And they had this whole great sort of photography campaign around it. So Miles was one of the people that was featured. And the school where I worked, Apple had given us a grant. We got a bunch of computers and stuff like that. And with it, they sent a bunch of promotional materials. So we got all these great posters to hang around the school, think different, this and that. So when I saw we had a bunch of the Miles ones, I kind of quietly just took one and like tucked it in my jacket. And I was like, that's going home with me. And it just sat in, I put it in a tube for safekeeping and I held on to it. And I always meant to get it framed and it kind of got lost in the shuffle. And then I moved. And then long story short is that, the first Christmas that my wife and I were together, we were going through some stuff, in storage or whatever, and it came out and I showed it to her. And lo and behold, on Christmas morning, it was wrapped up and she'd gotten it framed.
Oh,
So
man.
yeah, it was really cool. So I've had it on the wall pretty much ever since then. But parting question for you. You mentioned that you played in jazz band in middle school. What was your instrument?
I was a sax player. I played alto for my first few years, tenor, and then I switched to bari sax. And sadly, I gave it up at the beginning of when I started at Montclair. I only played it for a semester because I had to focus on choir and opera. But one of
Sure.
these days I'll pick it up again, and I don't know, try to play along with one of the songs. I mean, probably terribly, but I'll try to play along with it. I would just rather do the. I think I'll have a better chance of doing the vocals, trying to get my best Donald Fagen going on.
There you go. Fellow alto sax player here. I played in marching band, jazz band, and stage band in junior high. Long story, and I talked about it on my last episode. If you wanted to check it out later, but didn't follow me through high school. I had too much else going on, but yeah, so it's kind of funny and nice to have another fellow sax player on the podcast. So,
Yeah.
Manny, you've been great. It's been fantastic talking to you. Anything you want to plug? I mean, I'm definitely going to link to your other podcast that you're on, and I'll put a link to your Instagram as well. But anything else you wanted me to share with my 15 listeners?
All right. Hopefully you'll get 16 by the end of this.
Yeah, hopefully.
Like I said before, Emmanuel Cruz, Manny Cruz, the Toonie Tenor. Follow me on socials at the Toonie Tenor. Just for now, trying to find any gigs possible. I mean, I used to sing in a Latin band. Hopefully, I'll get that up and running again. I do a lot of singing at churches for the time being, for masses and different things. So if you're in the Northern Jersey area, you might see me there. And definitely check out the work I've been doing with my buddy Anthony. His channel on YouTube is Anthony's Animation Talk. And, enjoy just me geeking out about that. And hopefully one of these days, there is a little cover of me singing the second arrangement on my Instagram page. So definitely check that out. And that's in my top 10 of Steely Dan songs, by the way.
Mine too.
Second arrangement, yeah.
I will have to go find that. And if you get the band together, let me know because I'm within hitting distance of where you're at. So if you're going to play, I'll come see you.
Yeah, like I said, we'll check out the show. We'll have a good time. We'll get some Wawas before or after,
and some Taylor ham.
And I'll make it. I was like, you better order Taylor ham or else.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again, Manny. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Chad.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.